Chris back on the line though. Let's pull him in and see what if he wants to finish up what he was talking about. Chris, you with us?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah. A fault of StreamYard, the platform here, and my fault too, where I guess I gave not enough inflection in my voice to say, hey, this is not a statement, a question. Okay. Yeah, as I said, StreamYard can't banner my whole question with a question mark. So the question, a young colonel, George Washington, supernaturally preserved in battle by a god to assure the establishment of the United States of America, where we can live in liberty? Question. This is a question, not a statement. I've got muted before on Talk Heathen and here too, because they're assuming that this is a Christian apologetics statement. No, it's a question. Okay, that is going to be nearby, walking distance, the Battle of Monongahela. He's actually fighting on the Redcoats side against the French and Indian War, in the French and Indian War.
Okay.
Okay.
Chris, can you formulate your question?
Both the belligerents here and Chief Red Hawk and George Washington, both their statements are in the National Archives. Chief Red Hawk, oral. George Washington, a letter to his brother. That George Washington was shot at, 4 bullet holes in his coat. And this is him writing to his brother. So to speak, I can say it seemed like he was saying, even outlining his torso.
So get to the meat of this. So you're saying that George Washington was shot, and that means that he died?
Yeah.
That
shot? No, he was missed. He was missed. Shot at and missed.
Well, before we move forward, Chris,
we're speaking of not accurate muskets, but then again, I can say any long gun is quite accurate.
So there was smooth bore back then, though. I mean,
I'm kind of lost. And Chris, bear with me, because like I know that, you know, your friendly neighborhood atheist has a show that they're trying to keep fast paced and on point for the sake of the viewers. Is the claim that you're saying that George Washington, that he died, that he didn't die, that he came back to life, that he was preserved? Just if you could just condense it down for us, what the claim is, then we can start looking at the evidence for it.
Yeah, he was aide-de-camp to General Braddock at the time. At the British defeat in the Battle of Monongahela, near Pittsburgh.
Okay, well, we can get into the logistics of the battle and everything, and who was there. What is the claim, though? Is what we want to know. So is the claim that God protected George Washington? Well, hold on.
I was clear-eyed. It was just going to be said.
Okay.
He was claimed to be shot at 11 times, but did not succeed in killing him. That's the oral tradition that came from, at the time, he was still a chief, but a young chief, Red Hawk. But later in a campfire with Washington, he reveals the story that George Washington, then a general, over this campfire, that he didn't come down, that he had some spirit in the sky. This is Native American speak. Some spirit in the sky was preserving him for better things, the USA.
Okay, so let me see if I can't recap the claim, and you tell me if I've picked up on what you're saying. That God protected George Washington from getting shot, protected him from these 11 bullets, or so that he would survive in order to contribute to the founding of the United States. Am I with you so far?
Hey, Brian, yeah.
Okay.
And
Brian,
you respond to that.
Chris?
Yeah, you know, again, I say too that both documents, it's oral, written down, and then George Washington's letter to his brother, they're both in the National Archives. I say that. I even say that, you know, you can think of the National Archives as the scientific method database. There's more in the database to this battle.
Well, people get shot at in survive or don't get hit, especially in these old I don't just call it like Victorian era or whatever wars. That the accuracy of the smooth bore rifles that they were using is not what we have today.
Well, so I'm not even.
I gave that in gentlemanly debate that it's smooth bore musket.
Yeah,
but and I went on to say, ha ha ha, any long gun is accurate.
Chris, you don't even have to go that far, because yeah, you could say, okay, people would have duels and they would literally fire at each other and miss straight dead on, and the guns were inaccurate. You don't even have to go that far. I can grant you that that the historical account written down was accurate, that it happened exactly as it was said, that there was no exaggeration, that there was no misremembering, that all of this stuff happened, and that he was fired at 11 times and that he was missed 11 times. Even
all right, yeah, but God and all that would be
hold on, let me finish this thought. I can grant you all of that.
Yeah,
and you still have all of your work cut out ahead of you to prove that that's supernatural. With tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people on battlefields getting shot at, some of them being hit, some of them missing, some of them being hit and surviving, some of them being hit and some of them dying. The ones who survive, you're going to have a survivorship bias. Those are the ones you're going to remember. Those are the ones that are going to be written about. Those are the ones that are going to go on to change history. So I could grant you all of this, and you still have all of your work cut out to prove that it's supernatural. You could say it's unlikely. It's the odds make it unusual. Well, sure, but unusual things happen all the time because events happen all the time.
This is Texas sharpshooter right here, with George Washington being the target drawn around him because he happened to be the first president and went. But had George Washington had one of them bullets been fatal, we don't have any reason to believe that everything else that went towards founding the United States is not going to be taking place.
I don't think that everything that was written down was remembered accurately at that time. I don't think I know how people will exaggerate battle accomplishments and heroic tales of their leaders in order to drum up the courage of their men. I know how the human psychology works and how we do that. And even if we're attempting to be honest, just one retelling to the next, this game of telephone. I heard he was shot at 2 times. I heard he was shot at 5 times. I heard that they grazed him and that, that he kept on going. And stories build up like this elaborate game of telephone. Written accounts, even in historical, databases, aren't necessarily from reliable sources.
All right. To put a period on it, and I'll go into something funny too, but in seriousness, both stories dispassionately corroborate in the National Archives about how many times they were shot at. Okay. And then the funny part is, I am reading here, but a 200-pound, 6'4" Colonel Washington, he's in a clearing with a white horse. He's wearing a red coat again. He's a Virginia Royal at the time. And Georgie is a big target. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, and
I genuinely don't know if during the Spanish American War, were they taught to shoot at generals and officers, or did they think that if the generals and officers went down, that the men would, go crazy or something? I don't know. I don't know if he would have been a big target. Because I remember vaguely reading somewhere, and I could be wrong on this, but I remember reading that the fact that during the Revolutionary War, they were told to target the generals and the officers, that was seen as incredibly ignoble, and that it was violating the sportsmanship of war. And so it could very well be the case that George Washington, that he wouldn't have been targeted as an officer. I don't know. I don't like, so for you to just say that is the case, it might be, you might be right, but unless you have a little bit more knowledge of the history of battle and warfare at the time than I do, then I'm not necessarily willing to grant that.
Well, even if you do grant that, the fact that someone can get shot at 11 times and not get hit is that's just fact. That stuff happens.
From how far away? From if people from 10 paces away miss, in duels all the time back then to be standing across a field shooting at each other.
Yeah, as I said, it's walking distance to the battlefield, and it happened close in a clearing of a wood.
That none of those are scientific measures. And when you said that it was a scientific archive, no, it was a historical archive. The scientific method hadn't really even been developed at this point. And there's nothing scientific about simply writing down an account. That's an anecdote. It can be historical. It can be, hey, I witnessed this.
It can be accurate, but it's still an anecdote. Yeah. Or anecdote. Yeah. Now.
Okay. Granted.
The fact that we have these legends, and he was saying about, this general, I heard they were shot at him this many times and that many times. And that we have that documented down from like a secondhand account has more veracity. It definitely does than just something that was recorded 150 years later or something like that. But we still have to think about it as a war story, so to speak, where things tend to get exaggerated. Now, we can give you that, that everything that you've said about what happened with Washington did happen. They shot at him, missed him, holes in his coat and everything, just grazed, that does not get us to saved by God. We don't, that's not the next step in the methodology of figuring out what happened in that battle. That's not the next logical conclusion is, well, God must have protected him. There's so many other factors that are going to come into play before that becomes the answer that we speak to.
All right, thanks for being nice. I had this written down at the Atheism versus Theism Facebook group called Exchanges. And I said, similarly preserved, as if Providence, the mammoth-sized Second World War aircraft carriers, USS Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown, were out of their Pearl Harbor berths on December 7th, 1941, out to sea, for aircraft ferrying or repair reasons. So I said there's a quadruple coincidence. These are the three non-cruiser hauled ships, large aircraft carriers. They were out. The fourth coincidence is that this happens to be on sneak attack day.
Okay, Chris, I think we're probably going to have to save that different topic for another call, because we do have one more call lined up and we are running out of time. So I'm glad we finally got to get around to the George Washington story, though, and to kind of pick that apart, because I know you'd wanted to talk about that before. But we can talk about the warships on a later call, if that's all right, because we do have one more call waiting, and I want to make sure to give them some time to talk. And I think, Thomas, sorry, did you have something you wanted to wrap up with? You're muted.
Yeah, I heard a big what? All right.
All right, just a 20-second point just to tie all of this together. I've seen a number of calls that have said, whether it was the UFO claim that, hey, we don't know what this is, therefore aliens, to, hey, we don't know how George Washington could have survived all of this, therefore God. I think that there's a common thread here where you see something that seems a little unusual, or there's not really evidence for, or you don't necessarily know how it happened, and then therefore jump to these elaborate claims. That's not proper reasoning. If you actually want to know how the world works, you have to present positive evidence for positive claims. You can't just say there's a lack of evidence, or there's coincidence, or, we don't know, or evidence is missing, and, therefore put forward these claims. You have to back it up with empirical data. And yeah, we can get to the next caller, but that was just a line that I was seeing kind of drawn.
Yeah, that's kind of what I finished up with that Washington thing, is that, once we can grant all that, but the next step is not necessarily God. So, Chris, we thank you again for your call tonight. I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and we're going to